And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
All right, everybody. Eric Dibb, your most complained cop, NYPD. This is the 265 Police Live series brought to you by the finest Unfiltered. Of course, with me is the founder and the co-host of the podcast, John McCary, retired lieutenant. John, let's get right into it. Let's talk about the article that came out in Hellgate. Let's go.
Article comes out in Hellgate. I don't believe Hellgate's a big fan of this podcast either, but they actually took notice to the fact that Kaz Daughtry has a little podcast beef, and they basically correlate the video of Kaz Daughtry at that award ceremony, basically bashing myself and Eric's career, saying we contributed nothing, and they correlate that, and they basically say that he's, they show the lack of immaturity in the article. What do you think what the funniest part of the article was, Eric?
Well, I thought the whole thing was hysterical, but I think the part that I thought was funny where it talked about it was a rookie mistake for him to mention a podcast or his disdain for a podcast in his speech. But the part that I thought was the funniest where she said, if nothing else. So it left the innuendo that, hey, not only does he have a beef with the podcast, but maybe he's doing something else towards the podcast other than just having a disdain for it and having being emotionally charged against it. But it is hilarious, and I agree. Not only, listen, Kaz Daughtry, we know you watch this, but you have to be open to criticism, and you have to take it on your shoulders and let it roll off. And then they're not just taking shots at you in that article, but they're taking shots at us. It's kind of funny, right?
Well, they put out an article a while back about us. I think we put out the statement that Phil Caruso, the retired the former PBA president, Phil Caruso, when he said, what did he say? He said, police work is a contact sport. It doesn't look pretty on camera. And we did that in regards to an incident in the 121 where an officer was suspended after he was punched in the face several times for throwing strikes back. So they kind of blasted us in an article with that. Now they're kind of, they put out that whole article, The Table of Success, which I think is pretty funny. It's like an interactive article where it like basically goes around Eric Adams' tables of success. If you remember, he made the statement, all my haters become my waiters. And this, I think he was talking about me, Eric, and Sal, but I don't have plans on waiting anytime soon, but I would. I have no problems with it. So this article is now under that table of success under Kaz Daughtry, and I think it shows the immaturity on behalf of them. I was a little disappointed that none of the threats that we've been receiving were put in there. Again, like I do believe that there is a correlation between those threats and this administration.
Well, I think the reason why they didn't put the threats, I don't think they're really taking it seriously. I think this was just mocking the entire beef, that pretty much there shouldn't be a beef. There should not be a beef. Or basically, if you're in such a powerful position as you are, Kaz Daughtry, now the assistant commissioner of the police department, under Chief Jeffrey Madry, you have all this power. You should not be emotionally charged by what two retired lieutenants are saying. I think ultimately that's what it is. Just mocking the whole thing. I don't think they really care about the situation with us being threatened, especially pictures of families, especially young girls and a little boy being put out there. The pictures are shared online. Ultimately, it just shows they really don't care about it. I'm not knocking the reporter. I just think she was mocking the situation because it is funny. It's hilarious. It is funny it's gotten to this point that two retired lieutenants who've been doing this the entire podcast virtually, who are out of state, as they say, have gotten under the skin of Kaz Daughtry and the other weak appointed management. It just legitimizes this podcast even more, legitimizes everything that we've been saying because it's true. So before they were able to fluff the media, but now we hold them accountable. So you know what? It's funny, but it's necessary. I got a good laugh at it.
Yeah, and I appreciate them reporting on it, honestly. most of their reporting is anti-police, so I was actually a little taken back by it. But I guess it's like a weird, it really is a weird dichotomy what's going on now. I mean, because again, like I said, I think Eric, Dan, and myself are the biggest supporters of the NYPD, for the rank and file of the NYPD. But the administration has a huge issue, and they really lack maturity, and I believe they lack integrity, and I do believe they are directly linked to the threats we've been receiving. And I think time will tell. I think what happens in the dark will come out in the light. And, it's really all I got to say about it, about that article and about anything else. You got anything else on that?
No, I think it's great. If anyone has an opportunity to peruse that particular article, I think it's great. There's a couple of links on it. You could actually get to the podcast where we spoke about nepotism in the NYPD, which is a correlation to what's going on with Kaz Daughtry. There's a link there to the Table of Success article, and there's a link to the actual podcast. Like I said, I don't take it personal that they mentioned how you left over the mandate, and of course they put out my CCRB record. That just, it solidifies everything that I've been saying. As I am the most complained cop, I wear it and I own it as a moniker because it's a stain that I probably won't be able to lose. I'll probably have it forever. So that's ultimately the point of this podcast, to be the catalyst for change and just to solidify and validate our claims. This mandate was completely wrong. And also, if you're out there doing your job and you're doing intrusive police work, you may ultimately be the next most complained cop. And it's almost, to me, it's on the lines and the parallel of being accused of rape. If you're ever accused of rape, God forbid, there's no difference if you're accused or if you're actually found guilty. It's a stain on your record forever. It's something that you'll have to explain. It's the same thing having a CCRB record as the most complained cop or just a high CCRB record. It's something that you can't lose and stay there forever. So I think that's enough of that. Let's get into the next topic. What do you think?
Yeah. But before we do, I just want to make one comment. I take everything personal. I do. From day one, I take everything personal. The NYPD moniker is, we're a family. We're always a family. We'll always be there for you, right? You hear that at all these funerals and everything. You're part of a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and you're going to be there forever. I don't feel like I'm part of that brotherhood, and I haven't felt like I'm part of that brotherhood for a long time. And you either, Eric. So I take it all personal. I take it personal from starting with the religious exemptions to when they were telling me to enforce masks on my men and women, when they were telling me to wear a mask, when they were telling me I was dirty. I took it personal when they were telling me that we have to wait for legal to make calls while we're out there in the street in 2020. I took everything personal. I take it all personal because at the end of the day, it really is. It really is personal. And these attacks on our children, the attacks, the smear campaign against our command, I take it very personal. And I don't blame Kaz Daughtry for getting mad at this criticism. I blame that he actually shows it. I get a little mad sometimes when I get criticism. So do you, Eric. But I don't show it. You don't show it. I mean, it just shows the lack of PR skills that they have, the lack of maturity, the lack of leadership skills. And it's not just him, by the way. I'm talking about you, John Shell. I'm talking about actually the person that I look to is that they should all try to emulate is Jeffrey Madrick. I mean, the guy's been smeared all over the papers. He doesn't say a word. He goes out there, he smiles. He doesn't say anything. I heard him laughing when Kaz gave the speech, but I don't care. Kaz is his boy. Kaz is his boy. I get him back in Kaz, But Caban with his friends, I mean, if you're mad because we're saying cops shouldn't hang out there, too bad. Too bad. It is what it is. Let's get into Yusef Salaam a little. You going to go, Eric?
I thought you put on the video. Well, there's a delay. But anyway, so Yusef Salaam, right now, New York City Council member. This is a prolific case. Of course, it's another diversion from what's actually going on in New York City. But ultimately, it's a great topic for conversation. So Yusef Salaam is pulled over in a car, black car. It's tinted out, dark tinted windows. Let's keep in mind that there's 70% light transmittal that's regulated for New York State without any exemptions, of course. So Yusef Salaam is pulled over. The car stop was conducted extremely professional. His tinted windows were so dark that even a silhouette could not be identified in this particular car. The police officer that conducts this car stop on Yusef Salaam, who's now the motorist of this car, was extremely professional. He had probable cause to act on this traffic infraction, which is the VTL of New York State. probable cause, which is a level 4 encounter, according to People versus DeBoer Supreme Court case. So what's important to note about this is that it's not a reflection of the How Many Stops Act. So it's our opinion that Yusef Salaam is trying to make a correlation between the How Many Stops Act, why it's going to be important data, and why that's an important bill in reference to this particular car stop. And there's absolutely no relevance and there's no correlation, because How Many Stops Act is relevant to level 1 and level 2 encounters. An encounter, which is completely different from a level 4 encounter, which is probable cause for an arrest or a summons or citation. So what's important to note about this is that Yusef Salaam spoke about the encounter that he had with the police officer, and it was not reflective what actually came out in the body camera. It was a complete lie. So let's talk about that first.
Sure. So Yusef Salaam, he's newly elected. He was part of the Central Park 5. I am, there's tons of opinions on that case, but Yusef Salaam was arrested for rape in Central Park. He's part of the Central Park 5. There was a documentary I did not watch, so I'm not going to comment on anything on that because I really don't know enough about it. I was a child when that happened, and I never really looked into it at all. But he was arrested and later on in years released, and they said that he was wrongfully arrested, and I believe there was a claim that he was coerced into giving a confession. I know under Bill de Blasio, they were released from jail and they were given a large settlement. That I do know. So that's the only thing that I know about the Central Park 5. And so Yusef Salaam's a member of that. Now he comes out, he runs for city council. He runs against Inez Dickens. That's up in Harlem. He beats her. He beats the incumbent. He's an insurgent candidate. He beats her. And he comes in, and now he's a newly minted New York City councilman. He is voted to the chair of public safety, which is a big position as it relates to public safety in New York City, as it relates to any legislation that comes down involving the police department policy, or, your interaction as men and women on the street, like what laws are going to be passed, what laws you have to abide by, vehicular, and basically the direction of the police department. So he comes out, he's stopped by the police, like Eric said, and he gives a statement. So I'm sorry, he comes out, he says that when he becomes the head of the public safety chair, Eric Adams takes the advice of this podcast, vetoes that bill, tries to gather support to get the How Many Stops bill overturned. Yusef Salaam comes out and says, I will do a ride-along with the NYPD. Now, that ride-along was scheduled for last night, but Yusef Salaam canceled that ride-along because the night prior, he was pulled over by the police. And he gives the statement, and Eric, I just want to give his statement real quick before you go so everyone knows what it was. And this is what he says. He gives the statement the next day. He says, I'm not going on the ride-along anymore. I was pulled over by the NYPD. I'm just going to give you a snippet. He gives a very large statement, but I'm going to give you a snippet. This is what he says. Last night, while driving with my wife and children and listening to a call with my city council colleagues on speakerphone, I was pulled over by an NYPD officer in my beloved village of Harlem within the 2-8 precinct. I introduced myself as Councilman Yusef Salaam and subsequently asked a police officer why I was pulled over. Instead of answering my question, the officer stated, "We're done here," and proceeded to walk away. So, I mean, there's much more to that statement, but what do you think about that, Eric?
I have a huge problem with that statement. First of all, it's an outright lie. Thank God this time the body camera was released immediately for transparency purposes. So John and I both recently did a podcast where we talked about, should body camera footage be released immediately? Should it be in real time? And the answer is yes, except for a couple of exceptions. John and I agree and disagree on some of these things, but for the most part, body camera footage should be released immediately. I do believe there are exceptions, very few, but for the most part, they should be in real time, whether it's favorable or unfavorable to the NYPD. But in this particular case, it was favorable to the NYPD. The police officer was extremely professional. But what I find most problematic is that Yusef, early in his tenure now, and with the New York City Council, cannot be trusted. He gave an outright lie to the public, and I believe that he has to be held accountable. I don't mean as far as any formal discipline, but I think the public needs to hold him accountable. So does the media, and so does the police department, and acknowledging that an outright lie will not be acceptable, and that he should expect to be pulled over by the NYPD, especially when his car is not up to regulation and he has such excessive tint on his windows.
So I'm gonna say that I do believe he should be removed from the chair of the Public Safety Committee. I believe he should be removed from the committee itself. I think Adrian Adams should do that. I mean, this is it's a glaring lie. I was pulled over and the cop said, "We're done here," and pulled away. I'd like to play the video now and then get your thoughts on that, Eric.
Roll the back one for me too. You roll your back window, please. Hey, hello, I'm Officer Kentucky from the 2-6 precinct.
I'm Councilmember Salaam.
Council member?
This district 9.
Oh, okay. Have a good one.
Everything okay?
Yeah. You're working, right?
Yeah.
All right. Take care, sir.
Look at how is that for racial profiling?
Well, first and foremost, before we get to the whole racial profiling aspect and the bias that we perceive from the Civilian Complaint Review Board, first thing I can say is this: the ability for police officers, especially those that have the honor of being named and referred to as cop because they have that trained eye, is just a complete phenom. It's fantastic to actually witness this and watch this. Because, John, you and I both have been in a situation where you conduct a car stop, you have the traffic infractions, you have dark tinted windows, but immediately that police officer, I don't know him personally, but I can say immediately that police officer is a cop, because immediately his trained eye, and he knew in seconds that the council member was credible, that he believed he was a council member, and he knew from the stop immediately that he could exercise discretion at that point, and he didn't see any reason to carry on that conversation even further, which I totally agree with. At that point, why carry on the conversation? He decided to exercise discretion. He felt that he was credible. He was confident that he probably had a license, registration, insurance. Even though he did have Georgia plates, excessive tint, he felt that the interaction was credible. And that I say is the ability of a police officer, especially a cop, having that trained eye and the ability to make a decision within seconds based on that quick observation. What do you think?
I think the cops did a great job. I think they were consummate professionals. I honestly think they should be lauded. I think they should get a public apology from the councilman. And you know, I can't say enough about what a great job they did. And I think you're right. I think the kid is very sharp, especially the one that approached the car. You see that you cannot see anything. You cannot see the silhouettes of any individuals in that vehicle. So to make claims that police stop based upon racial profiling, especially when you're being stopped for very dark tints, is laughable, because you could clearly see, you cannot see the silhouettes of people in there. You don't know how many people are in that car. You don't know if they're male, they're female, they're white, they're black. You have no idea. You can't see anything. So he asked the driver, please roll down the back windows too. And you could see his flashlight shining back in his face, almost blinding him. So when he approaches the car, he does so tactically. And you know, I think he does a great job. He observes the two children are in back seat right away, and he lowers the flashlight as not to cause any harm to their eyes or to make them become confused in any which way. So he lowers the flashlight right away. He gets up to the vehicle. The council member identifies himself as a council member before the officer could say boo. He identifies himself. The officer then says, "Okay, sir, have a good day." But the officer is so sharp, he hears that he's on a conference call. He hears that he's on a conference call. He goes, "Oh, you're working right now?" Almost to make like a real small talk as he's walking away. And the councilman goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, sir, have a great day," and leaves as to not inconvenience the council member. So, I mean, I think, the only thing this officer has done wrong, in my opinion, is he extended professional courtesy to someone who clearly doesn't deserve it.
This cop was very sharp. I don't know this cop personally, but just from this quick snippet, this body cam footage, I can see that this cop carries himself extreme professional manner. The cop did a fantastic job. His approach to that car the tactics were on point. The conversation that he engaged with the motorist was absolutely perfect. The observations that he made immediately were on point. He was sharp. This is a police officer, I think, that should be emulated amongst the NYPD. The problem is this: he's in a lose-lose situation. So immediately when he was encountered by the motorist, and the motorist identified himself by a council member, at that point it was a lose-lose situation. If he gives him discretion, it's open to interpretations, open to conversations, open to a potential civilian complaint for making that stop. And if he writes a summons, obviously it's a catch-22. It's a lose-lose situation. He writes that summons, they could be held to pay. The council member behind closed doors could want a favor for this police officer to get transferred, or some type of backdoor deal so the police officer gets a smack from the city council member. How do we know this? Because this story is a tale all time. I mean, we watch shows like The Wire. That's something. The Wire, I think, is probably the most realistic cop show you'll ever see. And that's something that would come up in the show. Things like that, where a council member or some type of city local politician would want some type of slap, some type of repercussions to a police officer for some interaction that they had. So this is not far from the truth.
No, I think The Wire is the most realistic show I've ever seen about a big city in my life. Not even just police work, politics, education, street life, growing up in the street. I think whoever wrote The Wire was definitely from New York, and they would definitely had very intricate knowledge of the NYPD. Because that show blew me away. It really did. I was like, I don't watch much TV, but that show hooked me. I think I was out with the flu one week, and I watched it. I binge watched the entire thing, and I was like, this is unbelievable.
That show was amazing.
Great show. But yeah, so again, going back to the stop, the council member has Georgia plates. And to me, if that's his car, that's another severe problem here, because he has Georgia plates. So we know that the council member lived in Georgia. To run for New York City, for any seat in New York City, which myself and Eric may or may not do at some point. We explore the option. We keep it in our heads. But if we do, we will be required to move back to New York City a year prior to that election taking place. Okay, so we required, which to our knowledge, the council member did, right? He's a seated council member. But when we do so, we will have 30 days to register our vehicles back in New York, which is required by law. Apparently, we're being told that the council member moved back in 2022, which means that was almost 2 years ago, and his plates are still not up to date. Also, I believe on the stop report by the officer, it was given that he was also traveling at a high rate of speed. So I do believe for someone that is going to make law, for someone that is going to enforce law, you should also have to follow the law. However, I'm going to give a little snippet here. Tinted windows. I do believe that if you're a public figure, if you're a high-profile individual, if you're a police officer, I do believe that you should be exempted from tinted windows being a violation for you. I don't believe that will exempt you from being pulled over for it, but I just don't believe that it should be a violation. What do you think about that statement, Eric?
We spoke about this before. We spoke about this offline, and that statement I agree with, and I can tell you why. First-hand experience. So when I was working at PSA 7 in the South Bronx, sometimes on my way to work, I would have to drive on streets where the housing developments were on both sides of the street. And obviously, we would get a heavy flow of traffic. I was the Special Operations Lieutenant at PSA 7. I was well known. I was at the front line with my special ops teams out there making a lot of arrests, getting guns. So everybody knew who I was. And I did not have tinted windows. So it was almost like I was driving around in a big fishbowl, because there was one time where I was driving, got slowed up in traffic. I was in housing, and a couple of gang members happened to walk past my car, and they were slowly walking past. And once they realized it was me, it was almost like I was in a fishbowl, and the piranhas started to surround the car. And I never carried my firearm, so I didn't engage into it didn't get to that point where I had to engage them. But I could definitely see if this happened more often, it could get to that point. So I definitely think that there should be certain occupations that have an exemption to have tinted windows. However, that doesn't negate the fact that the stop was authorized and was done in good faith. I do believe the police officer had probable cause. And what we see a lot, so John and I we're pretty outspoken about this on social media, and we've been engaged by opposition when it comes to this stop. And what we've heard from some of the haters towards the podcast and towards police is, how do you know that the tint is excessive without using meter? And I can tell you this: New York State, in order to have regulated windows, it's 70% light transmittal. 70% light transmittal. 70% light transmittal is basically a clear window. So you don't need a meter to actually identify and use your naked eye to know that tint is excessive. And on the flip side of that, police officers, especially in New York City, especially with the crime rates going on right now, should not be addressing windows that are on the cusp of being clear and you actually need a meter. This particular car, these windows were so egregious, were so dark, you do not need a meter. I can tell you, just by looking at those windows, it's probably 5 to 10% light transmittal, which means it's excessive in the dark. You could not even see the silhouette of the occupants in the rear of the car and also the motorist. He had no knowledge that the motorist was black and the motorist was a council member until he approached it. Actually, the window was down and he saw the driver's face. At no time did he know if it was male. He didn't know if it was female. He didn't know if he was black. He had no indication until he approached that car, even with the flashlight, because when the tint is so dark and you hit that tint with the flashlight, the reflection bounces back at you. So what's your take on that?
I mean, to even just ask how do you know what's illegal when you stop? You have tints on your window. I cannot see a silhouette. You don't need the tintometer, which I don't even know if any of you guys or girls really have ever even seen that. And I don't believe you need it, because I could look at cars right now and go, that's 30, that's 0, that's 10, that's 15. I know just by eyeing cars. I know cars. I knew that most kids in the street know that. They could tell you what the tints are without the tintometer, especially when you can't see in the car's blacked out. There's 0% light transmittal. If you put your hand behind that window and you can't see your hand through that window, guess what? It's too dark. That's through our training, our experience, our knowledge. You know, people, get into just little stupid intricacies because they're trying to find anything now to say that this officer did something wrong. And the thing that they're trying to say that he did wrong now is that he didn't explain the reasoning for the stop. Now, again, I had tints on my car and I would get pulled over, and I never, ever. And I didn't even care if I don't have tints on my car and I got pulled over and I wasn't doing anything wrong. Anyone that knows me, I drive like 30 miles an hour. Everybody makes fun of me. You drive like an old lady, pull over, let me drive. All these, I constantly, everyone knows I take it easy. I don't care. I'm in no rush. I let people go around me. I wave. Everybody's cursing at me, giving me the thing and beeping the horn. I could care less. You come driving up my butt. I drive slower. But there were times I was pulled over and I literally had no idea. And in my head, I didn't do one thing wrong. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But I got pulled over. I've never, ever asked the cop, what did I do? Never. Because to me, it's almost disrespectful, right? Like, more than I did something. Like, I don't know what it is. What was something hanging in my rear view? There's a million violation. I did something. I'm getting pulled over for a reason. And I would just, I would do the same thing. Keep my hands on the steering wheel with my ID out, and I would, roll down all my windows, put my interior light on. Oh, how you doing, sir? Oh, good. All right. Thank you, my friend. Boom. I don't need to know why I was pulled over. I don't think that I was pulled over because I was bald or I was Italian or anything like that. Do you think he was required to tell in that specific situation with professional courtesy, extending professional courtesy? Do you think he was required to tell why he was being pulled over when he clearly wasn't asked?
No, I don't think so. I think if the council member had asked, hey, by the way, what was the reason for the stop? And if he failed to acknowledge it at that point, then I could see it to be an issue, because that would be a lack of courtesy, professionalism, and respect. However, the fact that he immediately exercised discretion, I don't think there's a reason to even explain it. And let's be honest, and I'm talking to you, Yusef, the council member. This is not a disrespect to you, but let's be honest. You knew exactly why they pulled you over. Everyone knows that you can't have in New York State, especially New York City. You're well aware of the infractions that you had. Everyone knows it. When you're driving, most people know if they're speeding. Most people know if they failed to signal. Most people know if they went through a stop sign. He clearly knew. He clearly knew. What I think they're doing, I think that they're drawing straws here. And I think that the stop was so professional. And the council member got caught with his pants down, completely lying about the entire event, the entire incident. I think that he sought every opportunity to get out of this ride along, and he seized the opportunity with this interaction, create some type of controversial atmosphere, some political theater to this car stop, and really there's nothing to it. The car stop was maybe 10 seconds long. I didn't record it, but the officer approached extremely professional. He rolled down the window. It was a quick conversation. He made the observation that he was credible. He exercised discretion. He moved on. I don't even know why we're talking about this. But what I do know is this is my ultimate fear. So John and I attend CCRB virtual meetings on a monthly basis. We give testimony, and we've been pretty adamant and expressive for the public to understand that this racial and bias profiling investigations by CCRB are mostly charged and not based on fact and based on emotion. And that's the problem. That's the problem I see, where if this goes to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, that where this case could go and how they could substantiate to this officer, despite the professionalism that he exercised in this actual police car stop. That's where I see the problem is, that they could say that the reason why he did not explain the reason for the stop, because what was going on in his head was biased and racially charged. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that? And how do we explain that to the public so they understand?
If Councilmember Salaam wants to file a complaint against the officer, the complaint's going to be for profiling, because that is basically, if you read through his statement, that is what he alleges on why he refuses to go on the ride along, is because clearly unconstitutional stops are happening where there's a heavy twinge of racial bias and racial profiling, something along those lines. In substance, he states it. In the way I read that is that he's alleging profiling. I do believe that the officer is black, that he is speaking, that pulled Yusef Salaam over, but that doesn't matter, right? Because facts don't matter and things don't matter and common sense doesn't matter. So Councilmember Salaam, if he files a CCRB, it's going to be for profiling. And you know what? It's just as ridiculous as the allegation of profiling itself, because it's a ridiculous allegation. Doesn't matter that I had tints. Doesn't matter that I was speeding. The officer pulled me over because I'm black. He couldn't see me in the car. Couldn't see me anywhere. But that's why he pulled me over. Because it's based upon my feeling. That's what I feel. He pulled me over because I'm bald. He pulled me over because he doesn't like my podcast. Whatever that is, it's profiling. And like we've said on this podcast prior, it's one of the, I think, in my opinion, it's impossible to charge without bias on the part of the investigator. You have to have bias on the part of the investigator without the subjects telling you, yes, I pulled Eric Dim over because he's got blonde hair and blue eyes. Without the subject admitting that, yes, that is the exact reason I pulled him over, there is no way to prove that allegation. How do I prove a feeling? Yeah, no, I know everything I was doing. I know I was driving drunk. I know that I have tints on my car. I know that I was speeding, but that's not why Eric pulled me over. He pulled me over because I'm bald. Profiling.
Well, to reflect on that and go even further, I think it's impossible to prove or disprove a racial or bias claim. And that's the problem. And I think that this police officer, as extreme professionalism that he displayed in this car stop, which is something we should want for every police officer to carry out within the NYPD and any law enforcement throughout the country. This car stop here, I think, is a model car stop of how a police officer should conduct himself. But with that being said, you're right. I think it's impossible to prove But what's also impossible is to disprove it. So if Yusef wants to make a claim against him and say that he was pulled over because he was black and he felt that was the reason for the car stop, it's pretty tough to disprove it. He'll always have that allegation against him, despite the fact that the tint is so excessive and so egregious that he can't even identify the silhouette. But I think people, again, they suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect. They don't understand the nomenclature of a car stop, and especially to understand that when you pull someone over with dark tinted windows, you cannot even identify the silhouette. So if anyone at home, if you're just curious, try it at home. If you know anyone that has excessive tint, or if you're someone who's out of state, maybe in Florida where tint is permitted in those states, some dark tints, especially because of the sun, because of the heat, see at, during the nighttime, if you walk up to a car and those windows are closed, could you actually identify the silhouette inside that car? And the answer is no. So I think it's impossible to prove or disprove these racial and bias cases. But I do believe if that is where this is going to go, and that's the problem for this officer, it's just, it's absolutely ridiculous. You cannot prove it or disprove it. And it just shows that this is the weight that's coming from the Civilian Complaint Review Board. The Civilian Complaint Review Board was indicating how they had lost funding and they had to cut back on certain complaints that they investigate. But they were not willing to cut back on the racial and bias investigations. So that leads me to believe that it's easy for them to substantiate.
Only when there's bias on the part of the investigator, because for several years the NYPD has been investigating profiling cases, and I believe they substantiated like 0.4% of the investigations, whatever. I don't know that that's the exact number, but basically none, almost none of the thousands, like only a few that, again, because they used bias on the part of the investigator. Because I don't believe anyone's going to admit to that. Yes, I did. I pulled him over because he's black. And I don't believe that that's actually going on in New York City either. I don't believe that that's exactly what's going on. So black guys in Harlem, black cops in Harlem are pulling over black people because they're black. What I mean, I don't know. But whatever. Who knows? I don't know. We're just dumb cops on this show. So maybe that is going on. Maybe that is going on. But let's talk professional courtesy here for a second. Like I said, I've never asked a cop why I was pulled over. I don't care why you pulled me over. I don't want to get into it with you. I don't want to waste your time. I feel bad that you pulled me over, whether I understand why that reason is or not. Officer pulls over Yusef Salaam. He lets Yusef Salaam go. He rushes out. Yusef Salaam never asks him why he was pulled over. He kind of gets out of the way of him because he sees he's on the phone with city council. He hears it in the background because he's sharp. Oh, how you doing, sir? No problem, sir. Extends professional courtesy. And should the council member get professional courtesy, that's up to an objective. But I'll tell you right now, like Eric said, if that officer didn't, he's going to have a big problem. He writes that summons, he's going to have a big problem. He already has a big problem just because he did his job. He's already at the target of a political witch hunt just because he pulled this council member over, was courteous, professional, and extended courtesy. So now I'm going to put it on the other end. I've pulled over numerous cops with tinted windows. I've pulled over black cops with the chip on the shoulder. Would you pull me over for? And I would give them the same attitude that they would give me. I'd be like, why do you think I pulled you over? Why do you think? I don't know. I'm like, oh, you don't know that tints are illegal? You're a police officer. You don't know that tints are illegal? Oh. I was like, oh, maybe you want me to write you a summons so we could verify it? And no, okay. And then I would leave, right? And I would walk away. Like, how does a cop not know why I'm pulling you over? Because of the tints. And honestly, I think it's a rude question to ask when you're a police officer, when you're getting professional courtesy, because especially when you have blacked out tints on your car. What do you pull people over for, right? And then the same thing, when I worked on Staten Island, I'd get some Mo. Yo, what are you pulling me over for, Mo? They think they're John Gotti and they think that there's someone special and they're getting pulled over. And it's like, I'm like, dude, you want me to write you summonses for the tints on your car? Like, what do you mean? What am I pulling you over for? You don't know? You were speeding, you're on your phone, and you got tints. You don't know why I pulled you over? You need an explanation of that? And that's where I think that cops are really, a lot of them, not all of you guys, But a lot of cops are dumb and they give a bad perception to the public. And that's why the public doesn't like you, because of people like that and chip on your shoulder like that and not realizing your own and not being humble and not realizing what you do. Oh, no, you should be allowed to speed, have tints, and be on your phone because you're a cop. And everyone should know who you are, by the way.
The politicians love the buzzword de-escalation, right? We talk about de-escalation all the time. I think what the police officer did, first of all, I want to go back and say that, again, he was extremely professional. I think he was a model police officer. I think he's a cop. I don't even have to know him just from that interaction. If I was a special operations lieutenant, that's somebody I want on my team. I think what he did was the art of de-escalation. Once he saw that he pulled over a council member who was conducting professional business on the phone, he had children in the back. There was no reason to take this even further. At that point, you want to disengage to the public. Hope they understand this, and the cops that are out there understand. You had that interaction. You want to disengage and get back to your car as soon as possible. There's no reason to carry it on any further. There's every reason for this police officer now to be in an uncomfortable position at this point, realizing he pulled over someone who is a council member that may take this interaction the wrong way and put him in a very, very vulnerable position in his career, whether he's right or wrong. And we've seen it before, and I'm sure we'll see again, because of the nature and the power that a council member may have, the friends that they have, the relationship they have, the nepotism could pull the weight on this police officer. So I think the fact that he immediately, once he identified him and he exercised discretion and immediately withdrew from that interaction, was the art of de-escalation. I think he did a fantastic job. I think there was absolutely no reason to now explain why you conducted the stop and carry on even further. And I'll say this. I do believe if he stood there and started to explain why he pulled him over, it could come off as now the police officer is trying to have a power trip over the council member. So I think that was extremely professional, and that was the smart decision.
100%. My man has a black belt in verbal judo. Why keep that interaction going? Why say anything that could be misconstrued even further? Because clearly it was misconstrued, right? Clearly his words were misconstrued even when it was on camera, right? Even when it was on camera, things were omitted and it was misconstrued, right? And questions were supposedly asked that never were. Now, I think we should also get into the release of the body camera and the statement. I want to read the statement by the NYPD. They, I spent all day yesterday advocating for the NYPD to release the body camera, and they actually did, to my shock, which I never thought that they would. To my shock, they released the body camera. So with the statement, by the way, they gave a statement and they did the vehicle stop report, which is another report that cops have to do where you have to document the race and the gender and the this and the that of the individual that will ultimately be used to try to prove a bias against police officers using sheer number alone. Another nonsensical report that they're trying to do, just like this How Many Stops Act. So at approximately 6:20 p.m. yesterday evening in the 26th precinct, an officer pulled over a blue sedan with a Georgia license plate for driving with dark tint beyond legal limits, a violation of New York state law. The officer approached the vehicle, identified himself, asked the driver to roll down his windows. The driver complied and identified himself as New York City Council member Yusef Salaam, performing official duties, at which point the officer advised him to have a good night. The entire account is corroborated by body-worn camera and the vehicle report. As the video shows, throughout this interaction, the officer conducted himself professionally and respectfully. He followed all proper procedures, including procedures that were put in place after Detective Russell Timoshenko was shot and killed through tinted windows in 2007. This officer should be commended for his polite, professional, and respectful conduct and for using his discretion appropriately so the council member could complete his official duties. To be clear, however, last night's exchange was not a level 1 interaction, as any vehicle stop is, by definition, a level 4 encounter, since the officer had probable cause of a violation of the New York vehicle and traffic law. And the following NYPD procedure, all vehicle stops are already properly documented with the vehicle report, as was done here. Eric, what do you think about that?
Ditto. The police officer was extremely professional. It's a level 4 encounter. It's not a level 1 encounter. There's no relevance to this How Many Stops Act. Everything was done by the book. The only reason why this is the topic of the conversation is because Yusef Salaam himself made this a big deal. This is the run-of-the-mill car stop that's conducted thousands of times a day on New York City streets, where police officers act extremely professional. Police officers, time in and time out, are investigating cars. We have a grand larceny problem right now. We have robberies. We have shootings. We have, despite what the mayor tells the public, crime is out of control right now in New York City. The police officers are doing their job. They're doing intrusive police work. It's funny you said the only thing that the police officer did was wrong was not issue the summons. I say right now, the only thing the police officer did wrong was actually do intrusive police work. This is the sad part. So the police officers that do the most, that take the most action, that are self-initiating police work to combat the crime going on in New York City through vehicle traffic law and also crime that's on the street doing intrusive police work, they're the ones that pay the biggest price. I know because I was that person. So this police officer, if he would have just let the car drive by and never paid any mind to it and just, or completely oblivious and ignored the car that it had tints and never conducted the car stop, he would not be the subject of conversation and not involved in a controversial car stop. This should not even be the topic of discussion. The only reason it's topic of discussion is because Yusef Salaam took the opportunity himself to get out of this ride-along and also to make a controversial issue, again, to try to strip away the layers at the police department. And this is further abolishment of the police, even if it means lying to the public.
So, we've been very critical of the upper echelon of the NYPD. It is my contention that they are directly related to a known monster threatening myself and an active on-duty member of the service threatening myself and Eric's children, as well as numerous other nonsensical things that I could care less about other than identifying that cop and how and what that other guy was told about us. So those two things I have huge problems with. But I will say in this case, you guys are welcome. John Schell, Tariq Shepard, Kaz Daughtry, you're welcome for taking the advice. But you guys messed up. You guys messed up because clearly I'm a fan of transparency and you're not, right? So now the NYPD is in the right and you released a body camera, which I think was a great job. I even like your little statement, which I don't think was necessary, but I like your little snippet that you wrote. And I think it was great. And I think it was very accurate. But what if the table was turned? What if you looked at that video and it was really bad? And you're like, wow, it kind of shows that there might be a bias because of the things the officer said to him. And then when he got back in the car or prior to stopping him, whatever it is. What if it was really unprofessional? Would you ever release that body camera? Because it's my contention that you should, right? Because what'd you do? Jamani Williams put out a tweet last night. He said something along the lines of, oh, wow, I didn't know that the NYPD could release body camera videos right away. Duly noted. Something along those lines. And it's so true. So true, because it's arbitrary. Why is it up to the police commissioner when body camera comes out? If it's for public transparency, why could there be a political spin put on any of this? Why does the police commissioner get say of what gets out and what doesn't? Like I said, if there's privacy issues, take out those privacy issues, edit the video, give yourself a time frame. But I think you guys messed up. I think you guys did a good job by clearing the officer and showing the smear campaign against yourselves and this department and actually fighting back for once. So I applaud you for that. But you don't realize the greater picture. Because like I said on the last podcast, what I say, 5 years from now, probably less than that, body camera video will be accessible to everybody. So why not start moving towards transparency instead of less transparency and bullying your critics like you clearly do, but also taking their advice?
Well, I had said it earlier on this podcast, but you and I discussed it. I do believe that whether body camera footage is favorable to the NYPD or unfavorable, it should be released immediately, except in a few cases where there may be a short delay, as you said, taking some stuff out for privacy issues. But we're talking about a short delay. It should be released at all times. We should be able to own a good interaction and take credit for it. But at the same token, with great power comes great responsibility. We should be able to take ownership of a negative interaction, even an interaction that has a bad light on the police department. And that's where strong leadership comes in, where they have the opportunity to say, hey, we, not these officers, but we failed the public, and we're going to explore what happened here, and we are going to make moves to fix it. That's what I expect from the police department. Not saying they did it, pointing blame, but saying we did it. When your police officers take action, in this case, make no mistake about it, the upper echelon is taking credit for the professionalism of this police officer. And I believe they have the right to do that when they're in a leadership position. But if there is an incident that is unfavorable, well, they should also own it and take the blame for it as well. So the coin has to be analyzed on both sides. So one more thing I'd like to analyze. So on a prior podcast, we had Edwin Raymond on our show, who was a whistleblower for the police department. He himself had actually campaigned and ran for this actual same position that USAM is in right now. And when Edwin Raymond was on the show, he discussed that if he was police commissioner, what he would implement. And he discussed documenting an actual warning, a police encounter. So I do have varied opinions on it, but I do believe that in this case, I agree that should be something that we explore. So Edwin Raymond, if you're watching this, I know we will have you back on this show soon. We'll discuss more issues. And I do respect your insight on the possibility of having a warning. And the reason being, I do believe that perks should be allowed in all different careers. So being a council member, it should be a perk that discretion could be exercised because of the position that you have. You are serving the city. So it should be a perk that for a small or minor infraction that it can be overlooked. However, how often are we going to overlook something until it's actually corrected? So at some point, it would have to be documented somewhere where Yusef Salaam was actually given warnings about these tints, because eventually he does have it corrected. Or is he just going to drive around for the next 2 or 3 years with Georgia plates and excessive tint and just saying he's a council member? And again, getting discretion. So I think at some point it has to be addressed, and this condition has to be corrected.
Yeah, I have no issue with the warning. I mean, my only thing is, like, how much paperwork are these guys going to do? I'm told, like, they're literally secretaries, dude. Like a vehicle stop report, this stop report, that report, a use of force report, and this. I mean, you have the body camera, right? Just keep the body camera on all day. Get artificial intelligence to generate these reports at this point. I mean, the stuff's there. If any of you guys watch our clips, they're all AI generated. We don't do anything. They were all AI generated. So, I mean, there's AI out there that could take your body camera and move it right onto a report. There you go, Kaz. Another piece of advice for you. So you should look into that, since you're the drone boy or the technology boy. So look into that, because I think that's a way to alleviate all this stuff. And then you can have all these reports and throw them in Microsoft Buy and look at all your statistics and do all that stuff and really deduct absolutely nothing from any of it. But you give LePetri a good job to have another few things for him to look at. But the other thing I want to highlight, though, is the unions. Now, Hendry put out a statement defending this cop. But that's not enough. That is not enough. And I always believe a great defense is a good offense. So if there is a CCRB, and I believe that there is one, and I'm almost 100% positive that whether Yusef Salaam called up or not, now that CCRB has the ability to generate their own cases, they have generated a case. Should be seeking your lawyer right now and suing for a false complaint. You should look to sue for a false complaint or defamation on behalf of this police officer, because things have to stop. And you're always the bigger guy, right? The police department's always the bigger person, and they're not going to go after anyone but their critics. And they're always going to have tough skin, except when it comes to me and Eric. And they're never going to, and they're always going to take the high road. But I don't believe this is the high road to take, and I do agree with Eric, and we did a Twitter space last night about it. with a bunch of people, and Sal Greco was on, and Sal even said, I think this officer is gonna be the target of some type of retaliation over this. And the more I think about it, I think Sal's right. And I think you guys need to go on offense with this, not to prove a point, to protect the officer, but to also set a precedent of what happens when you lie about the New York City Police Department, when you lie about your stop with a New York City police officer, and smear the guys and girls that are out in the street. Show them that you actually have their back. Maybe you won't lose 3,000 this year. Maybe you'll lose 2,800, but it's a start.
Best defense is a great offense. You're right, because it's better to have action than reaction. So I think the police department should take a preemptive strike right now when it comes to the unions. The unions themselves should take a preemptive strike to constantly put this out on social media. They should be out there with signs. They should be holding Yusef Salaam accountable through social media. They should be screaming at the top of their lungs through social media. Everybody should see this. Everybody should hear this. Again, take a preemptive strike towards CCRB. Because ultimately, and you and I know, what's interesting about this podcast? I think this actual podcast, where we talk about Yusef Salaam and the car stop itself, is really reflective and relates to a lot of other podcasts that we've actually done. And one of them we've done it. One of the issues that we spoke about is indemnification. So it's really important to know that this officer was extremely professional. And I do agree with you that the CCRB is going to self-initiate a case on bias, and they're going to be in contact with Yusef Salaam. And if they substantiate for potential bias, which they could, because I think it's impossible to prove or disprove, which they could because it's based on emotion and they don't really need any data for it, the police officer then is exposed to civil liability. And the police department, if we look at the past, does not indemnify for substantiated civilian complaints. Would this case be any different for the police department? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that it would be any different. I think that because it is so high profile, the union will go out on a limb for this one particular officer. But for the things that we don't see in the news, that we're not going to discuss because we don't know about them or not all over the news, they will not. Because that's clearly what you see the PBA, they circle the wagons when it's a big incident in the news. And then if it really doesn't get out there, Mo, don't worry about it, Mo. Yeah, Mayor's doing a great job. He gave us a great contract, Mo. And that's what historically they do. So I'm saying if the CCRB goes after this officer, they should fight that tooth and nail. But even prior to that, there should be some type of suit against New York City Council and the public safety chair. And again, I do believe there should be avocation for him to be removed from that seat because he clearly showed a lack of integrity. Now, I understand that if you were arrested or you were stopped, and again, when I get pulled over, I feel the same way that anyone else does. I've been stopped, I've been arrested, I've been ripped out of my car for no reason and given no explanation. Driving while Italian happened to me plenty of times in Jersey. Walking while Italian happened plenty of times to me in New York City. For nothing, toss, searched up against the car. So I understand that it's a traumatic experience, and I understand that you could be nervous and misconstrue things too. But I don't see it in this case. I just don't. The officer was completely polite. The interaction was a null interaction other than a quick, slight pullover. All right, sir, have a great night. Right? I mean, I think he should have drove away with his head held high. Like, wow, the police department respects me. I got myself to this point. I was in jail at one point in my life and a target of the New York City Police Department, and now they respect me. But he didn't. He went the other way. And there was a huge smear campaign. I saw articles. I saw a reporter for City and State, Jeff Colton. He posted, Yusef Salaam was pulled over apparently for driving while black.
Well, that's the unfortunate narrative that's going to be brought out to the public because that's sexy. That's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear that the police officer was extremely professional. It's favorable to the NYPD. That's not a sexy story. They want a sexy story, a story that they could bite on. What was the title of this from the New York Post? The title didn't address the fact that the police officer was professional. It just said that a council member was pulled over, because that's more of a sexy title. I do think that the police officer completely disarmed the situation, and he disarmed and alleviated any potential for this to escalate. Again, I go back to de-escalation. I think the police officer did a fantastic job and realized his best recourse was the least amount of engagement. Get in, get out. I thought that was, I just thought it was great police work. It was a great observation. He did a great job. I'm really disappointed that the council member himself is not praising this police officer in public. I understand he doesn't want to do this right along, but he should be praising this officer, saying, you know what, I got pulled over. I had an interaction with the police department. It was extremely positive. Is a car stop scary? Of course it's scary. It's scary for anyone. It's scary for John. It's scary for me. It doesn't matter if you're a criminal or not. Having an authority have power over you to obtain your information, to stop you, to tell you where to stop, to tell you to give their information, knowing that you could potentially receive a summons that's going to cost you money or just impede your day. Maybe you're in a rush. His mind is on, he's on the phone conducting business. No one, let's be honest, no one, not even cops, like getting pulled over by police officers. No one likes it. It's an uncomfortable position. However, the police officer did everything in his power to de-escalate it and bring that situation to a calm. And I think the police officer did a fantastic job. And that's what I expect from the council member, is to praise the officer and say, these are the interactions we need to see. That's why we want to compile data, because we want our data to reflect an interaction as I had. But that takes a big man. That takes a man of character to do that. So I really question the character of Yusef. I don't know him well. What do I know? I know that he lied to the public. And the question is, why did he do it? Is it for his benefit? Is it for his own gain? Is it so that he gets props from his fellow council members? What do you think it's for him to gain? Why would he do this, especially in his position?
It was a political strategy. You know, I got pulled over. I was scheduled to do a ride along that I don't want to do, because it doesn't matter what the outcome of that ride along is. Even if they prove to me one thing on there, I'm still going through with this bill, because I believe that the police unconstitutionally stop people and have a racial bias and racially profile people based on the fact that 97% of the stops in New York City are against Black and Latinos, while ignoring the fact that the victims of violent crime are 98% of the time Black and Latino. You know, and again, I don't, you know, we're going to have Edwin Raymond come on, and we're going to talk about those two facts, because we put out a meme. I don't know how to pull it up here right now, but we put out a meme basically making fun of Adrian Adams' statement, where we gave those two facts, right? And I do believe that those two statements are much more nuanced and need to be discussed further, because there's a lot more there than just 97% of the people being stopped are Black and Hispanic, so the police department's racist. You know, there's a lot more nuance in there than just that. And then there's a lot more nuance than 98% of the people are 90% of the victims of violent crime are Black and Latino. It's a lot more nuance than, oh, so now we have to go out and stop all Black people, because we're not saying that either. You know, it's a lot more nuance. So we're going to have a conversation surrounding that whole thing. And that whole thing and how many stops, and we're going to go back into that. We're going to do a roundtable. I think that'll be a really good one. So definitely check that out when it comes out. But I think we got to look at, and this is the first time I'm doing this. So Eric, I'm going to ask you to stay muted, because I've never done this before. I'm going to try to play you the video from Viral News from my Twitter, where you're going to see the mayor's statements now about this stop. And they're highly disturbing to me. And we'll talk about it after. Let's listen to what the mayor is going to say. And hopefully I get this right. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Here we go.
Now, I wanted to really respond to Councilman Yusef Salaam. I'm really excited about him. And just like the former public safety chair, I think he brings a level of uniqueness to the role of a public safety chair. When I spoke with him, we communicated this morning when he shared that he was pulled over last night, and he and I spoke. I told him I was going to look into it. The police department immediately looked at the video of what happened and being stopped. Even when I was a police officer, I was stopped several times in a vehicle stop. It is, it can be extremely intimidating and traumatic, and it's a very frightening thing to be stopped, and we need to understand that, and I understand it because I've gone through. And so once we look at the video, really hats off to not only the councilman and how he handled it in a very calm manner, but those officers. I spoke to both those officers. Those officers were extremely professional as they communicated with the council person, as they shared. They identified themselves. I'm officer so-and-so from the 2A precinct. The councilman responded in a very calm manner. They asked the councilman to roll down his back window because a lot of people don't remember what happened to Officer Timoshenko. I was the borough president at the time. We lost him because someone actually discharged around through tinted windows, which is very frightening if you do a car stop to approach a vehicle with tinted windows.
What do you think about that, Eric?
Oh boy, here we go. First of all, he said he's extremely excited about him being council member. He's in a unique position. All right, that's fine, well and dandy, right? But you're the mayor. The police department works for you. And you said on your campaign that the key to prosperity is a safe city, right? Safety was a major concern, right? That was his top priority, being the mayor, especially with his background as a captain. I mean, we all know the truth. There's a zero police officer, never was a cop. But that's his campaign. That's what he stood on, about safety. And this council member is supposed to be the public safety. The public, he's supposed to amend public safety with the council and the police department and for the public. But what he did not tell you is that what the council member told him was a complete lie from what actually happened in the body camera footage. Yes, the police officer, we know that. The police officer was extremely professional. But he's giving so much credit to the council member. And it takes extreme character and it takes balls, the mayor, to stand up and say, you know what, council member? I said he's in a unique position. But yes, you know why he's in a unique position? Because he lied to the public and he lied to me. My officers were extremely professional and he lied about the encounter. And he should say at that point, forget about you canceling the ride along. I'm canceling the ride along for you because you don't deserve to actually partake in this. But the council member just completely lied. Yes, is it intimidating to be involved in the car stop? Of course it is. But we're going to give him so much credit. Why are we not acknowledging the fact that he put the police officer in a hazardous position of pulling over a car with such dark tinted windows by pulling him over at night, having to conduct a car stop? Anytime a police officer pulls over a car, he or she is in a vulnerable position. He could get hit by a drunk driver. This is at night. It's a hazardous condition every time a police officer conducts a traffic stop. But these were negated facts that weren't discussed. Just giving credit to the council member and giving credit to the police officer, both at the same time. I think it's a complete dichotomy. And he always puts himself in a position where he can placate to the moderates and he can placate to the left and look like he's doing the right thing. He talks from both sides of his mouth. And that's the part I don't understand. Some of these cops that you and I talk to, they're so excited. They say that Mayor Adams is backing them. And he says some of the right things. But what he says, is it matching his actions? Not in this case. You need to wake up and see what's actually going on.
Completely disappointing statement. You see why he has the lowest approval rating of any mayor in New York City history. I mean, the guy is just playing both sides. Like you said, Eric, he does not acknowledge why the council member was pulled over. He does not acknowledge the violations. He does not acknowledge the statement and the smear campaign that happened all day was going on. And all day I was doing release the body camera. And I'm getting threats that I'm going to be sued for defamation of character. I'm like, sure, just release the body camera. Let's go. Just release the body camera. Sue me for defamation. That's fine. Because I said, and because what my take on the whole scene was is I believe that if you release the body camera, it will show that the council member misrepresented what happened. And I was right. And the reason I said that, and the reason I'm right, it's because I found it hard pressed to believe that any cops that dumb to really go back and forth with a New York City council member, or to treat them like that, or to treat anybody really like that. I mean, again, they're on camera. This is all provable stuff. Like, that, so you could say that, oh, cops are terrible people. We get all the oink, oink, oink and the pigs and all that. Okay. So maybe they're lying for the camera, but they're on camera. So let's see it. Let's play the tape, and that statement from the mayor just shows it. That clip was from Viral News New York City, his Twitter account. He puts it out there. He's been following the mayor around and Kaz Daughtry. But he is a friend of this podcast. We do speak from time to time. We have differences on the mayor, on how the mayor wants to lead this city and the upper echelon of the NYPD. But that's fine. This is what this is. This is an open platform. And the other thing I just want to highlight there is that the upper echelon's not going to say anything, right, about this or go into this at all, right? They're not going to mention this other than what they did so far, and that's fine. If we play PR, I think that by releasing the body camera, that was a bold move, and by putting out a statement, that was a bold move. But I do think that New York City Mayor Eric Adams took the advice of this podcast from a month ago, vetoed that bill in an attempt to gather support so that ultimately when the How Many Stops Act goes through, he could literally say, well, I did my job. I did everything that I could do and it went through. What do you feel is the actual goal behind vetoing it? Is it to try to actually overturn the bill, or is it just more politics?
I mean, this is a pretty bold statement, but I got to be honest. I don't think he knew that if he vetoes it, that if 2/3 of the city council vote, it could overturn his veto. I don't even think he knew that. I'm going to actually take credit with this podcast and say he found out through this podcast. I don't think he knew. It may sound insulting, but I have to be honest. I don't think he knew. I don't think he was going to veto it until this podcast, but I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's a win-win for him. Again, it's exactly what I said. If he vetoes it, it placates to the moderates and says, hey, I'm a crime fighter, knowing after this podcast that if 2/3 of city council vote to overturn that veto, it's going to go through anyway. So if he gets to placate to the moderates, he gets to placate to the left, especially with his approval rating right now. I think it's a win-win. I think it was a great move. But until this podcast, I don't think he had any intentions to veto it. He never mentioned it before. I don't think he ever had any intentions to have this How Many Stops Act or to impede it, to stop it from actually passing. I think he's actually supporting it, to be honest.
I agree 100%. Really, you have anything else? Because I just want to do I want to talk about one quick thing. You have anything else on this? We're going on an hour and 12. Anything else on this stop or the How Many Stops Act before we move on to the next?
No, I think we covered everything. I think it's fantastic. And what's important to note for the public is that the How Many Stops Act is not relevant to this car stop. And it just proves also that Yusef himself is going to grandstand and use this to propel this How Many Stops Act. It's not relevant. And it just shows a clear inadequacy for understanding of police work from the city council, especially someone that's supposed to be mending a relationship with public safety and the police department, the public. There's absolutely no understanding of police work. We need someone with police expertise in that position. And Edwin Raymond would have been a great person for that spot, whether we agree with everything he says, but at least he has police expertise and has an understanding of the silver linings of police work, where Yusef himself does not know the police work. And I don't think that they actually understand the How Many Stops Act themselves. I don't believe that they understand the levels of intrusion and actually the case of people versus the board. I just think they'll take every opportunity to have every layer to strip towards the police department to ultimately abolish the police. And for that, that's all I have to say. If you have something else to bring up, let's do it.
Yeah. No, but I before I go on the other thing, because I want to talk about the detective that got his own case overturned. I just want to get your thoughts on that. I think we should just go on record with that one. I think people would love to hear the most complaining cops' thoughts about that one. But before we do, I just want to one more thing on that. I do think that Edwin Raymond would have been much better as a public safety chair for the New York City Council. Edwin Raymond, in his book, if you haven't checked it out, he speaks a lot about cosmetic diversity. And he speaks a lot about how you could put all black faces in the police department to lead the police department. But if nothing changes in the system stays the same. And that's basically what we've seen. Like, diversity in the New York City Police Department is cosmetic. And I agree with him 1,000% because there's been no significant change. It doesn't matter. Where I think I lose, and I think most of you will lose him on, is when he says that the New York City Police Department is systemically racist. That's when I get lost in his argument. But it's something he's willing to explore and discuss where other people will not, right? It's just, no, this is the fact. And if you don't agree with me, you're a racist. It's like, okay, how do we have a conversation with it at that point? So I don't believe that the New York City Police Department is systemically racist towards any community in this city. I do believe they are looking for ways to bring down crime where crime is the highest. Unfortunately, currently, that's in neighborhoods that are made up of black and brown individuals, right? Black and Hispanic. It's just a fact of the matter. At one time, the highest crime rates in New York City were Italian and Jewish communities, and that is not the case anymore. So I do believe that that is the target, and that is the overall mission of most of the NYPD, except for the party department and the upper echelon, who they just want to go party and do whatever else. But I do believe the men and women, the hardworking men and women in this department, their job is and their mission is to drive down crime. I just think a lot of bad ideas have came out in the last 20 years, and a lot of it was pure laziness, driven on quotas. And again, I don't believe the quotas were racist. I just believe they were wrong.
I agree. I mean, even when we talk about this car stop in itself, and I think the argument for the Civilian Complaint Review Board, if they take this as far as we believe they're going to take it, is that the laws of probability is that the cop knew he's pulling someone over that is black. And this ideology can be favorable to the police officer and also unfavorable. Why? This police officer, despite the fact of his race, but he's working in Harlem. And the demographics of Harlem, I'm pretty confident, is about 98 or 99% black and Hispanic. So on the flip side, the CCRB could say, based on the laws of probability, the cop knew that he's going to pull someone over for being black. And I believe that could be an opportunity where they go with this bias. And where I say it's favorable to the police officers, the fact that the police officer is doing intrusive police work. So he or she will always be painted as a racist, because documenting these vehicle stops, if 98 to 99% of that area is black and brown, well, that's going to be reflective of his intrusive police work on his vehicle stops. It is going to say that he is racist. And the argument is, well, who am I going to pull over? The demographics of this neighborhood reflect the police work that I do. So that's where I think the problem is. And it could be just complete semantics.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, you look back at my career, right? I locked up probably 96% male whites. Probably a very, very overwhelming majority of them were Italian males that I locked up. Does that mean that I'm biased against Italians? Does that mean that I'm biased against male whites? No, that was the demographics of the area that I policed in when I was a cop, right? And the same goes for this how many stops act, or we should call it the real name, how many encounters, how many times New York City police officers interact with the public. Is that data what is it going to actually prove? Now, I'm all for transparency. I'm all for seeing how many stops you guys and girls actually do. And I believe it's phenomenal amount, and it'll prove how much restraint you guys actually do have, where you interact with the public so often, and really the overwhelming majority of them are positive interactions with the public that you never hear about, right? And I think it'll help to prove that, but that's not what the goal of this is. The goal is to say that you're doing unconstitutional stops and that you're targeting Black and brown people without taking into account the demographics of where people work, and again, or what cops do, right? So it's one of those things. I think it's being highly misused. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation with Edwin Raymond, hearing his thoughts on that.
I think that the how many stops act itself is absolutely ridiculous. Just bogs the police down with more paperwork. And if done properly, which I don't think it's going to be done properly, if done properly, it would bring policing to a halt. What I think is going to happen is I think the police officers are going to bypass administrative procedures to get the job done, just as we've done for many years and we continue to do. We cut corners so that we could actually implement public safety. So police officers spite their own nose to bite their face. So I believe that's what's going to happen. I think what should happen is I think there should be test subjects. And I think that they should take, I think there should be some type of random pick, maybe several cops in each borough. And we take, let's say, rhetorically speaking, John and myself. Let's say, okay, for a 6-month period, they have us work in the 1, 2, 3 precinct. And then for a 6-month period, John and I will then work in the 7-5 precinct. And then a 6-month period, we'll work in the 5th precinct. And simultaneously, while 2 other cops are working in the 4-0 precinct who are Black. And those 2 cops are then working in the 1, 2, 3. And then 6 months later, they're working the 5th. And then, now we have a control. Then we can compare the data. And then we can see, is there any racism? And I would put my money that John and myself and 2 other police officers that are bouncing around from different precincts based on different demographics are policing the same, and the results are going to be the same. It's not going to be racist. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's too many variables in that, and I wouldn't think that was a good thing. I mean, again, did the guy get injured? Is he hurt? What's his motivation level at that time? Does he know the command? There's so many variables and bouncing people around. I mean, honestly, what I see is they're looking to segregate the police department. Oh, only Black people should be stopped by Black cops. Only white people should be stopped by white cops. Do that. Segregate the police department. Say white people can only stop white people. Black cops can only stop Black cops. And then take the data and tell me that the police department's racist, because that's ultimately what the data will show at the end of the day, because it doesn't matter. They're not actually looking for the truth. They're just going on the data, right? So I don't know what the ultimate goal of that is, to prove bias in the New York City Police Department. I believe the New York City Police Department, if you want to look at bias and you want to look at numbers, we should be saying that they're misogynistic, and not misogynistic, that they have a clear bias towards men, because the overwhelming majority of people that they arrest, regardless of their skin color, are men. They have a gender bias. They hate men. The New York City Police Department hates men, but we're not going to look at that. Why? Because it's ridiculous, because men commit the majority of violent crime nationwide and in New York City. So I want you to prove the bias before I defend the bias. Prove the bias. Prove that it's there, because they've done a miserable job of doing it this last 10 years. I don't see it.
Well, my point to this idea of doing test subjects moving around is that you can't prove or disprove bias. And that what you're going to see is that police officers police based on the demographics and in relation to the crime that's in that area. If you and I were both working the 1, 2, 3, I'm pretty confident that our arrest would be predominantly white. It'd probably be Italian males. It'd probably be, males of Irish descent, maybe Jewish descent. Then those would be our interactions because of the demographics of the area. If we lock up somebody who's Black, there are some Black people that live in the 1, 2, 3 precinct, very, very few, but most of them would be transient. And if you and I are both working together in the 4-0 precinct, the 7-5 precinct, our arrests are going to be Black males. I think that's a great point, though. Most of the interactions we have are male-driven. We lock up men. Men commit most of the crime. Do we lock up women? Yes, but the overall majority is men. So that could be another bias that they look at also. It's just completely flawed. I think ultimately, I'm going to say that In my opinion, you cannot prove or disprove this bias unless someone outright said it, which is just complete imagination. I think furthest thing from the truth that we would see, for someone to actually stop someone and say, hey, I pulled you over because you're black, or I pulled you over because you're bald, like you use that incident. I don't think we'll ever hear that. That someone would have to be really stupid. So other than that, I think it's impossible to prove or disprove.
Yeah, so moving forward, before we end, I just want to talk quick about the CCRB. Homicide detective, I believe in Queens, gets his CCRB from a detail. He goes, he winds up getting arrested. He's out there in uniform. He gets an arrest. Them or they, or however they consider themselves, is non-binary, and files a CCRB against the officer saying that he misgenders. Body camera clearly debunks it. Clearly debunks that he misgenders anyone. I think it shows that he asked the individual how they would like to be addressed. He was nothing but professional. But even though the body camera disproved it, he was found substantiated on that charge. He goes out on his own. He emails the executive director of the CCRB, Jonathan Darsh, and he's like, hey, listen, this is the evidence that was used against me. I don't see how I was found guilty, right? Obviously, he's a homicide detective. He knows how to investigate things, right? He's like, how could you find me guilty when you clearly see on the body camera that it was? John Darsh looks at it and overturns the decision. And he doesn't exonerate him. He gives him an unsubstantiated. So now, just like Eric Dim, has happened several times, more than several times with Eric, where it was basically disproven. This will stay on his record forever and will affect him the rest of his professional life, regardless that it never happened. What are your thoughts on that, Eric?
Oh, absolutely. I believe that an allegation of a civilian complaint that ultimately leads to a substantiation is on parallel with a rape allegation. If you get a rape allegation, whether you're guilty or not, you're stained forever. In this 50A, that is ultimately the significance and the purpose of it. It's just to stain your record as a police officer, to make you unattractive in the NYPD, destroy your career, and then ultimately in the afterlife of the NYPD, make you unattractable to any profession. Not just law enforcement, but any profession, to make you unattractive to get a good paying job in the workforce in America. And I think ultimately that's the idea of the 58. You're staying forever. I think that actually in my case, one in particular, the accusation was that I stuck my finger in someone's rear during an arrest. And that case, I took to trial. That case was dismissed. I was found not guilty. But yet, if you refer to my 58, it still says substantiated. It doesn't tell you the inner lines of the case. It doesn't say it was overturned. It doesn't say I was found not guilty. So that's a stain forever. I'll always have an accusation that I stuck my finger in someone's rear. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think this 58 has to be amended and changed. I don't think that a substantiation should stay on your record forever, even if you're found guilty, but especially if you're exonerated or unsubstantiated. There should be some type of statute of limitations. I believe after 3 years, they should come off your record. We talk about the Clean Slate Act. And with the Clean Slate Act, violent perpetrators have an opportunity at a second chance at life, but yet police officers don't, and you're staying forever.
Yeah, no, only rapists, murderers, burglars, people that rob people, only they get to get clean slates. Police officers, never, because you're the worst. Police officers and conservatives, because if you have a conservative point of view in New York City, you're evil. If you align with Donald Trump, you're evil. That's what we've seen. What do you think about this detective having to go out on his own, though? What are your thoughts on that? To me, that sits out there like that's the biggest thing to me. I'm like, why did he have to get it overturned? What did he pay union dues for? What are you doing, Paul DiGiacomo? What are you doing?
Well, I've put out numerous tweets, especially on Instagram. I broke down for the police officers, not the detectives. This is a detective we're talking about, but I broke down for the police officers that they pay $51.84 on a biweekly basis. Approximately 20,000 members that are in the PBA union members. That would be about approximately 26 million a year that's going to the union. And so that's why I ask, why are we, and when I say we, police officers, detectives, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, why are we still paying union dues? And this was my question, and I still ask it. Anytime a police officer, detective, sergeant, lieutenant is involved in a pickle, a jam, they are using their own funds and their own attorneys. So that's why I asked this question. Can you name a police officer or any rank that the union saved their career, that without the union, their career would not have been saved, other than utilizing their own funds to use their own attorney? Can you think of one? I can't.
Oh, I can't either. If you're asking me, I can't at all.
Yeah.
But I think this shows a glaring hypocrisy in the unions itself. I think as much as this kid just put out a blueprint, he put out a blueprint for all of you. So I think everyone should have this article in their locker for when you get a CCRB and get in contact with this kid and speak with him and see how, shoot him an email. I mean, his name's out there. Be like, hey, what would you recommend? I mean, because on it, he did it. He set the blueprint. He set the blueprint that the union should have, right? Because he had a union attorney. The union actually did represent him, right? But did they really represent him? Did they really? No, he had to go out on his own to overturn that. He had clear and convincing evidence that it never happened, and there was no stink. So it's in my opinion that as much as the union's going to now rah about CCRB, I guarantee, were very mad at this gentleman that he did that. And he went around them. Oh, I got egg on my face now, Mo, because again, what are we seeing? We're seeing the police department from the upper echelons, and we're seeing unions. They think that they're mob characters. They think that they're mob. Well, you got John Shell talking about this thing of ours, or like I said, I truly believe that they believe that me and Eric are rats, that we swore omerta, that we swore the code of silence as criminal thieves, that we would never go against this family that threw us to the wolves, because we didn't do that, and I truly believe that the talk in those offices, not everybody, but I think most of them, was in a negative light toward this detective. Why does he got to make it a big deal for? Why can't he just go away? Just leave it alone. It's not a big deal. No, it is a big deal. It is a big deal. It's a big deal that there's a lie and a smear on this person's record for the rest of their life. And I just want to give that. I don't know that detective personally, but I just want to give him kudos, because honestly, I don't think I would have been able to do it either. I probably would have just took it on the chin and walked away. And Eric, you have, right? Like, you didn't even know that you could appeal these things later on, right? I mean, you fought them, you took them to trial, but he actually went a different route and seek to get it overturned.
I had no idea. It's interesting. I'm super proud of this detective, and I actually wish that I would have taken that opportunity and took that route. I think it was extremely brilliant. I myself, I was constantly in contact with the union, especially the LBA, and said, listen, I want to have a conversation. Put me in a conference with Jonathan Darr so I can discuss some of these issues and find out why I'm a target. And maybe we can have a better understanding, and I could actually explain the inner linings of special operations and the observation skills, and give a better perception and understanding if we can meet face to face. And again, I was always silenced, and I was told, don't worry about it. You lose a couple of days, but you're going to get a great pension. Yeah, it's easy for them. It's okay for them, but it wasn't okay for me. So again, to this detective, if you're watching this, we know you can't come on the podcast right now because you're currently active, but I just want to extend and tell you that I'm proud of you. I wish I would have done it myself. I think it's outstanding. I was completely silenced. I think you did a fantastic job, and you really exposed what we always say is that you're staying forever. So even though you've won that, and it's unfortunate, but that stain is still on you. So I agree with you. It changes your life. It changes your trajectory. I mean, you said your professional life, but I think it ultimately changes your entire life, because at any time, if someone Googles your name, that will come up. I mean, if you're a single guy and you're out there, especially in the day of the internet, and you meet a woman, and she decides, you know what, you have a conversation, you're going on a date. She wants to find out if you're some maniac. So she goes out and she Googles your name. And she, I'm not a single guy, but if she types up Eric Dim, she's going to say, oh my God, this guy's a monster. He pointed his gun at someone. He stuck his finger in someone's rear.
She might be in that.
It doesn't just, what's that?
I said she might be in that.
But I tell you what, it doesn't just affect your professional life. I really do. I think ultimately it affects your entire life. I really do think so. Again, there was one thing, one more thing I wanted to mention, but I'm trying to remember what it is. Maybe after you say something, it'll come back to me.
Yeah, no, but that's a great point. I didn't even think of that too. You're right. Everybody, right? Your kids, your kid meets a new friend, and the friend's like, "Oh, my daddy's Eric Dim. Could we have a sleepover at Eric Dim's house? Oh my God, no way. You can't go to that guy. That guy's a maniac." 100%. You're right. I never even looked at it. It's not just your professional life. It is your entire life. So kudos to you, detective. Well, we don't know you. We would invite you on the podcast, but we don't want you to be a target of this podcast because we're, God forbid you give your opinion against the NYPD. They're going to come at you like a bunch of little girls and send their, oh, Jimmy, go get John and scare him so that he'll shut his podcast down. All these things. They're going to go get all their friends to try to scare you. So when you do retire, if you're eligible for retirement soon, when you do come on, if you want to come on, we'd love to have you. We'd love to lay that blueprint out for you. We'd love to give you a platform to convey that message to the men and women in the New York City Police Department. So get in contact with us when you're done and we'll speak.
It is kind of funny just since we're talking about it. We haven't delved into it too much on this podcast, but I will say it's quite interesting when you talk about Omerta, because when I was in my last year on the job, there was no loyalty towards me. There was no loyalty towards you. No one stood up for us, but yet they expect us right now to stand up for them. There was no loyalty. You were supposed to fight for John when it came to this mandate, and not just John, everyone else that was affected by this mandate. And you were supposed to fight for me. I was out there doing what you paid me and trained me to do. I was doing intrusive police work. I was a special operations lieutenant. My job was to go out there with talented men and women and get guns off the street. And it was acknowledged every time I would go to the civilian to a civilian complaint investigation where I was interviewed. It was acknowledged by the attorney that was there on behalf of the LBA that, hey, if this was someone else, this would probably not even be detained, or this would just be unfounded. But because it's you, Eric Dim, they'll probably give you charges or substantiated. Why is it me? And that's why I was disappointed in the union that they never took a preemptive strike and tried to figure out why are they going after Eric Dim specifically? Is it because he was a white alpha male? What was it? What was it? Because I was out there arresting the criminals, black criminals, in an area that was the demographics were black, but they didn't explore this. They didn't fight for me. So we're not rats. You don't have any loyalty to us. I don't have any loyalty to you. We made an internal affairs complaint. I have no problem saying it. I'm proud of saying it because this is bigger than just me and John. Me and John are very tolerable of the attacks that we got, the slander. We're very tolerant. We were going to let it go. But when pictures start getting exposed of kids threatening our families, there's a line that's been crossed. I have no problem with it. I'm proud of it. And if anyone has an issue with it, you can defriend me right now. I'm losing friends every day as it is. Everyone's scared to talk to me. They're scared to talk to John because the way to the police department, we've become enemy of the state. And that's fine. If you don't want to talk to me and you don't want to talk to John because you're scared, that's fine. But don't pretend you don't know that they're talking about it. Don't pretend that you know that the way to the police department is not coming on us. Don't pretend because we all know it's there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we even let when people were asking where I live and where I work, when active cops are calling my friends and people I know and acquaintances I have and people that they think hate me to find out where I live and where I work so they could try to do nefarious, dirty things to try to hurt my money, not knowing that I own my own business because they're so dumb. They only know what they're told. That I even let that slide because I was like, you know what? They can't do anything to me anyway. I could care less. Let them call the business I own. Go ahead. Good luck to you. I'll take the complaint for you. Don't worry about it. But I even let that slide. But now you're sending nefarious people with false information to come after me. You're sending images that look like our children with threats, making death threats. That's not conduct becoming of an officer. And I'm going to go as far as to not only should that guy be relieved of his duties, but whoever knows him and hasn't said a word, you should also be stripped of your duties. So I have no shame in this. I never had many friends anyway, so I don't really care. I always had a lot of acquaintances. I'm a nice guy. I say hello to everybody. I don't care if you're the janitor or the chief. I talk exactly the same. This is my demeanor. It doesn't change. And I just think you guys went too far, and that's where it is. So I was disappointed in the Hellgate article. Like I said earlier, I thought it should have delved into everything that was actually going on with this podcast and the allegations that we're making. And I have no faith in the Internal Affairs Bureau. I mean, and at some point, we'll see how that investigation ends. And if it doesn't end the way that we want it to end, we will go public with exactly what the details of that investigation were and the exchanges.
Honestly, I'm completely disappointed that there's a cop that's out there right now, an active member hiding behind a fake meme called Old Cops Are Woke, who's completely unhinged, unstable, carries a badge and a gun. I'm completely disappointed about it. And the bigger issue is not even just a safety to us. The bigger issue is that he or she is a danger to himself and everyone else. This should not be someone that carries a gun and a shield. But I'm more disappointed that there are cops out there right now that know the identity. No, and listen, we get it. You knew that John and I were being attacked, and you didn't say anything. You knew that there were memes and jokes. That's fine. We actually laughed it off ourselves. We were pretty tolerable. We didn't want anyone to get exposed in this. But once families start getting threatened, and we're talking about kids, pictures that the implication is that they're going to come after our families, pictures of maps, pictures of duct tape and zip ties, referencing a potential home invasion. I mean, this is crazy. When I think of that, I think of the movie with Gerard Butler. It's just insane. A law-abiding citizen. But no one spoke out and said anything. And still, no one's saying who it is. And there are cops out there that know. And I'm saying this right now. I don't care if you talk shit about myself and John that we made a complaint. I don't care. What I can tell you is this. If you know the identity of All Cops Are Woke and you refuse to give up that information, you can defriend me right now. Because to me, you're even worse. You are worse than All Cops Are Woke, and you don't deserve the badge either.
Oh yeah, forget defriend me. I'm coming for your job. You could forget because we're clearly not friends. I don't think you should be a police officer. I'm coming for your job because that is completely wrong. And people could call me a rat. I solved a burglary pattern, one of the many burglary patterns I solved in my career, and it happened to be some kids that I was actually knew from Bensonhurst. And when I had the kid in the interrogation room, he said to me, "How do you live with yourself? How do you sleep with yourself at night? You're a rat." And I'm like, "I'm a rat?" I'm like, "You break into old ladies' houses and you think that I'm a rat because I serve the public? Because when I walk around this neighborhood, people know that I'm a cop and know that I do the right thing and I hold my head with integrity and know my family and know where I sleep at night, and you think I'm a rat?" I'm like, "You're the rat." And the same thing here. You're going to say that me and Eric them are rats? Call me whatever you like, but you're the rat. And you know it. You're a sneaky, sniveling little rat. You and anyone else keeping your mouth shut about it. You're all cowards. And I keep getting calls. "Oh, be careful. Be careful about your pension, Mo. Be careful about this." Listen, I'm going to tell you, like I've been telling everybody, I'm going to just make it public. This is you. It's a box, right? And you could infer what you want because that is you. You're a female cat, all of yous. Because you think I'm worried about my pension? You think Eric's worries about his pension because we put out satirical memes and give our opinions? This is how you want to live in this country? This is the country you're going to live with your children? You're going to hide behind that you have a pension coming? Are you serious? You got to do some serious soul searching, all of you, because I'm sick of hearing about the pensions and my pension and the 2% and the 5% and the this percent. And pretty soon there's going to be no pension because you're going to be so scared you're going to have hid behind absolutely everything and it'll all be gone. So keep your own, fears to yourself, because it's not going to infect me. And believe me, I'm going to insult you like I've been doing. This is you, box.
At no point should we ever hear these things that we're hearing. We shouldn't hear that, hey, what did you expect? You're talking bad about the police department. Like we should expect, listen, we get it. We're being critical of the police department, being critical of politics, we're being critical of legislation. We expect that we're going to get opposition and hatred. We expect even satirical memes about the podcast. And we laugh at it. We're open to it. But actual threats and the way that the police department brought upon us, that we don't expect. But the implication, what did you expect? Hey, maybe they're going to come after your pension. This is the most ridiculous thing. So it's okay with you. You can actually sleep at night, look up at the mirror, look up at the ceiling and say to yourself, oh, wow, I can never speak about the police department because they're going to come after me. I won't be able to feed my family. I have to keep my mouth shut. Do you realize what you're saying? You cannot give your opinion. I get it. When you're active on the job and you're employed by the police department, you can't talk bad about your employer. That makes a lot of sense. But you're retired. Let's get something straight. We are not cops anymore. We are civilians. And for all cops are woke, and for the cops that know who all cops are woke, you're not cops either.
Oh, absolutely. If Eric Adams right now turns around, he says, oh, I got to sleep with all your wives because it's for public safety. I have to sleep with all your wives. You'd all give up your wife. I have to. It's my pension. I got 2 years. I got 4 years. Oh, I'm going to do 27. No, I got it. Oh, I'm going to be a captain. Oh, I'm going to do this. You'd all do it. Like, and don't think you wouldn't. Like, search your own soul. You do it. You'd be like, oh, yeah, no, he's a good guy, Eric Adams. He just got to sleep with my wife because for public safety. For public safety. So, I mean, because that's literally where we're getting to at this point. And Eric, would you say that they said, what do you expect? You know what I didn't expect? I didn't expect that the police commissioner would send his mobster friend with lies to come after me. I didn't expect that active police officers would make online threats against our children. I didn't expect those things. That's what I didn't expect.
Well, I did expect that the cops would actually sit by. I always said we police our own. I said on the podcast, I talk about social media. I really believe that. I would say we don't even need internal affairs, only for some exceptional things, a full-out investigation. We need to find out maybe some cops that are out there robbing banks. But do we really need an entire internal affairs bureau? I don't think so. I didn't think so because I figured we police our own. I can tell you right now, if there was a cop out there threatening other cops' families with pictures implying their kids, John said it, and I'll say it. We'll arrest you ourselves. I don't need internal affairs. I'd be happy to put the handcuffs on you. You're an animal. You don't deserve to have this badge and this gun. But for the cops that are out there, that you know the identity of all cops are woke. And John and I were very tolerable. We don't care about the memes. Those were funny, the satirical memes, the jokes. We don't even pay attention to it. For the cops that identified themselves, that were giving us threats and inviting us to fight at a bar, we don't care about that stuff. We let it go. But when you start threatening families, the game is over. You cross the line. And for the cops out there that know the identity and can't identify that the line has been crossed because you're too scared to speak out, you'll actually go with the masses to stay comfortable with the men and women that you work with in the police department. Coward. That's what you are. Coward. And I have no use for you. You're not a friend of mine. Absolutely not. And you know what? When we find out who all cops are woke is, maybe we won't just come and have a conversation with all cops are woke. Maybe we'll have a conversation with you too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. It's infuriating. I'm not going to lie. It's completely infuriating. And just the cowardice amongst men and the apathy in the hearts of men, especially men that I worked with and men that I loved and respected. And a lot of men that I used to look up to. It's very disappointing to me. And I just think, and those are the things, that's what I didn't expect. We expected the memes. We expected people to trash us, talk about our careers. I don't care. We were sharing them. We were making fun of ourselves, sharing it. But that all changed. That all changed. This went absolutely way too far.
Can we make one thing? No. It's important. You said earlier that AI does the stuff for us. And they do a lot of stuff, but I want people to know that the satire memes that come out on a daily basis about the NYPD are by a talented person that we know, who we're not going to disclose the identity, but that is some pure talent of exposing the NYPD, the weak management through satirical memes. We have somebody who does a production fantastic job. That is not AI. So I just want to say that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the video clips I said were AI. The satirical memes are from a very talented individual at this department, also threw in the trash. And one day his identity will be revealed as well. And I think it'll be a shock to everybody as well, because he's an inconvenient person. Right, his career was inconvenient, and the reason why he's no longer with this department is inconvenient. So he's part of the finest Unfiltered. It's Alamo Defender 1 at Alamo Defender 1 on Twitter. If you guys want to follow him, he doesn't just make memes for this podcast; he does a lot of other memes. I personally think he's much more talented than the Babylon Bee. Babylon Bee goes on national news and they get stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff they did about the border recently, very funny. But anything involving the New York City Police Department, New York City politics, I mean, Alamo Defender 1 is the guy, and you'll find him at the finest Unfiltered. So that's it. So we're gonna keep going. We got a couple of great shows lined up. We're gonna get more onto the onto every different topic, and we got to start having people come back on. We got a little sidetrack with all this nonsense that's been going on, but we'll be back on. 2024 is going to be a hell of a year, hell of a ride. Take the ride with us. Eric, you want to end with anything?
Nah, that's outstanding. I think we nailed it home.
All right.
I think that's
awesome. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, 265 Police Live, brought to you by New York's finest retired and unfiltered podcast. Be right back at you.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.